my number one goal in every time we meet like this is for me to go through the text and help you understand what's going on. And hopefully as you get through, I mean, honestly, it should get easier as the texts go. You know, when we get to the medieval period next, you know, next week, it should, you were still going to deal with Beowulf, but Beowulf is also going to be in translation. So at least you don't have to read it in the Old English.
I'll be right
But
back.
I mean, as it is next week, you know, it's just one of those things that you take as you go, and we'll see where we get to. And one of the reasons I have you do journals is so if you are off base, I can really help you. And I can give you strategies for trying to make sure that you understand everything. And plus, if you take a stab at things and say, is this what's happening? Or if you ask questions, I can actually go to those lines and I can specifically address places where you're confused. Okay, does that make sense? So feel free to ask all the questions you want. And don't worry, I didn't write any of this, so it doesn't hurt my feelings if something's difficult. I just want to make sure and fill in the blanks and help you guys understand everything. So that's why I do these recordings. So what we'll do is we already went through book 1 yesterday and talked about how Aeneas was kind of blown off course, and Juno tried, who was, you know, it's like the Roman version of Hera, tried to essentially destroy all the ships. And then Neptune, the god of the sea, said, stop it, leave my seas alone and stop sending these storms. And he sent all the winds away and calmed the seas. And thankfully, Aeneas and most of his people all survived. And 7 ships made it through. They weren't totally destroyed. But because they were blown off, they had to land. And they ended up landing in Libya at Carthage. And what's funny is, or ironic, it's kind of like with Oedipus, the reason Juno even started messing with them is she didn't want them to land in Carthage, because she had heard this doom that was going to happen in this prophecy that Carthage would be destroyed by the Trojans. And she didn't understand exactly what it meant. Of course, it was super cryptic, but because she messes with them, they have no choice but to stop in Carthage. And so she, in a way, by trying to stop fate, she makes fate happen. She's not very forward thinking in that. But she does that. They land, and at the very end of book 1, Venus, who is the mom of Aeneas, so he is a half god, he is a demigod, but she knows that Dido has to meet Aeneas at the very end of the book. And so book 1. And so what she does is there are 2 things she does. One is she makes him look all pretty. So she kind of does her little goddess magic on him. And so he's, you know, she hides him for the longest time, but when she finally reveals him out of a cloud, he's super, you know, beautiful looking. And so when Dido sets her eyes on him, he's magnificent compared to everybody else around him. The other thing she does, though, is she sends her son, Cupid, who is the god of love, and who's the one who shoots people with arrows. And she tells him, I want you to hit Dido with an arrow, and I want it to be the most, you know, amazing love ever that she can't deny, and she can't do anything, and it will never end, and it will like obsessive love, because she doesn't want Dido to send him away. She wants her to help him. And the only way to do that, she thinks, or ensure that it happens, is for her to fall in love with Aeneas. But that's a bad thing. She's playing, we say playing God, but she's playing around with fate, and she's messing with Dido. And so, you know, would Dido have helped him? Probably she would have. But because of falling in love with him, other things are going to happen to Dido. Okay, so now Dido at the very end of book 1, you know, feasts him and his men. She says, okay, welcome, you know, definitely opens the gates of Carthage to them. And then they start having a feast. And then she asks at the very end of book 1, can you please tell me what happened to you guys? Why are you guys at sea? Where are you going? What are your plans? All that kind of stuff. And this is the book where he tells them what happened in Troy. But this is not from the Greek perspective. And the Greeks certainly felt that they were right to go after Helen and take her back. that they were justified in sacking Troy. But for the Trojans, that's not the case. Of course, they think it's all unfair. And so, so when he says, you know, you want to know the story, but he sees it as a very sad story. And so he kind of says, you know, this is his task, I guess, to tell them how horrible it was for the Trojans. Every woe the Trojans underwent. And by one legend, not only did they sack Troy and take all the girls as slaves and kill everybody else, but they also sowed the ground with salt so that nothing would ever grow there. And so he even said a peopled city made a desert place. Well, everybody died or was taken captive. And so now he says, well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you all that I saw and a part of which I was. But he says, look, if you listen to this, no one would not cry. Like, it's that woeful. He even says Ulysses would, and that's Odysseus, actually. That's the Roman name for Odysseus. And Odysseus was cunning and crafty, and he's actually the one who invented the Trojan horse that became the downfall for the Greeks. I mean, for the Trojans, because they brought him in. They brought the Trojan horse inside the city of Troy. Then the Greeks were hiding inside of it in the hollow stomach of the horse, let themselves out, and essentially that's how they sacked Troy. That's how they finally won. But he says, even if, you know, even Ulysses or even Odysseus would not be able to listen to the story without crying, even though he's the one, you know, he was the enemy. And so he says, he goes, okay, but since you're interested, I'll go ahead and tell you. And I will restrain my tears and briefly tell what in our last and fatal night befell. Okay, so this is where we are. And so this is the entire chapter. I'm just moving it over so I can make sure I keep on pace. Okay, so he talks about the fact that the war had gone on for, you know, almost 10 years. Everybody was weary and they were all tired of fighting, but they had to do something. And so this is when they created the horse. The steed of monstrous height, the sides were planked with pine. And so they kept on, you know, they put all that stuff together. And inside, they put, inside, they were going to put, so hide their soldiers, okay? And so then they rolled it over so that Troy could see, you know, that it was seeable by the people on the walls of Troy and stuff. And then
Is there any way to take my face off here? Because sometimes I'm having to get up and do the phone, and I
you
don't
can
want to
turn off your video.
I'm looking at edit display name. Don't mirror my video. Is that what I'm Ash?
Yeah,
No.
do that. Try that. Because
The other
once
day,
if I show, because I'm sharing stuff, I can't see you anyway.
I know, but when I went back to watch the videos to restudy, I was still on there, and everybody else could see me that day. We thought we cut it off. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Just a second. Let me do it. That should do it. Because I just pushed, I clicked you and said to stop your video.
Okay. Yeah, because when I do start video, okay, yeah, I see stop video at the bottom, but I was scared it was going to stop our whole video, you know?
No, you just, if you click on, you should be able to click. Let me see if I can click on.
Yeah, I see now. Whenever you did it, it put a line through it.
Okay.
The last time I thought I'd done it, I was just sitting there the whole time waving my hair, getting up and down, answering the phone. I'm like, oh my gosh.
And when you come in, you can always turn off your video before you ever come in.
Okay.
You don't have to use it. And I don't require it. I'm not one of those who wants to see that everybody's paying attention or something like that. I know, and I know you're working too.
I'm trying to pay attention, but I have to get up and down, and I'm sorry. And on Mondays,
remember, this is recorded, so don't worry about it. You're just in here, so I'm just pretending to talk to you. And if you're there, you're there. And if you're not, it's okay. I'm just trying to go through it. So I cover the things that are most important. Okay.
Yeah, I listened to all of it back before I take my test, because I'm the one that I said I might come to Douglas, but I don't want you to come to Douglas for me taking this test. But I get a nervous wreck with that. And I'm like, I would do so much better in person. But then with me, with the doctors all the time, with me and my husband after the wreck. And then, you know, I know I had you last year and I had the 2 surgeries. I have 1 more to go still.
Well, don't worry about it. You take it as you need to.
Okay.
And I try to have everything available, but I also try to give you a big opening so that you have time. So go ahead and look through these when you're done. That's fine. Okay, so the other thing that he said, and this is a detail that it's known in Greek myth too, so it's in the original Greek stories, but so they put the Trojan horse where it goes, right in front of the gates of Troy, and then they acted like they were all gone. They sailed away and went around the corner essentially to this bay and hid all the ships. So the Trojans come out and they're like, the Greeks are gone. And the Greeks have been on their shore for 10 years. And so they really, he even says, we thought for Greece, their sails were hoisted and our fears released. So essentially we thought, okay, they're all gone. And the Trojans are pretty stinking happy because they think, oh wow, the Greeks have given up. The camp's deserted where the Greeks used to be, and the tents are all gone, the ships are all gone, everything is done, and so they're actually feeling kind of hopeful, and essentially what they do is they say, look, what about this horse? Are we going to take it inside? Are we going to take it inside the walls? So some people even say, well, why don't we this essentially they were told that, well, this was raised in honor, like, hey, this is a parting gift to the Trojan horse. And somebody said, well, why don't we break down the walls a little bit so that we can get the horse inside? And then several people though said, no, let's burn the horse, or dump it in the water, or at least let's cut some holes in the sides to make sure there's nothing inside. Literally, a bunch of people say that. Let's dump it out in the ocean, or let's set it on fire, or let's just at least, break open the sides so we can make sure there's nothing inside. Okay. All great advice. And the Greek warriors inside of it would have all died had they done it. They would have drowned if they threw it in the ocean. They, of course, would have died horribly if they'd set it on fire. But they would at least have been caught if they'd opened up the sides. But no, they don't do that. In fact, one person, Laocoon, who was famous for this, and in fact, there's a statue of Laocoon and his sons. That's a Hellenistic statue in humanities class. But Laocoon said, no. He goes, we can't do this. You can't bring this horse inside. Do you actually think the Greeks are gone? No. You can't believe this. You have to not trust this Trojan horse. Okay, so he's trying to convince them not to go along with it, and he tries to slam his spear into the side of the horse, and it pierces through the wood and actually sticks into the hollow belly. And the groans of Greeks you could actually hear them because somebody had been injured. Okay. And so they would have been caught at that point, except something else happened. They would have actually thrown more spears into him, probably would have killed all the Greeks, except that essentially one of the gods actually made something else happen. Because the fate of Troy was to fall, what happened is essentially it was Zeus who did it. Well, Jove by the Roman gods. Zeus sent snakes, and they actually went and bit both Laocoon and his sons until they died. And so essentially all of this, there were enough distractions and enough, things stopped people from doubting. And plus people didn't want to doubt. They wanted to think that it was all over. And so they're impressed with the horse enough that they're just like, nah, I don't believe that. And so, see, and they also left a person, and this is a trembling miscreant, the guy, and he was actually bound to the horse. And he said, alas, I'm so unhappy because my friends, the Greeks, abandoned me. They left me behind. And he goes, don't worry. He says, there's nothing in there. And he says, whatever my fate ordains, my words shall be sincere. And he says, I neither can nor dare my birth disclaim. I am Greek. Sinon is my name. And so we have one guy, Lao Kun, on one side, who's like, don't trust it. Let's, and he actually stabs a lance into it, a spear into the side. But then Sinon is there and he's like, no, 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 no. Say, I was left behind with it. And I was abandoned by my fellow Greek people, and who, as they were leaving, they decided to leave me behind. But I was only, essentially I was Greeks because I had no choice, but he says, he goes, when Ulysses, this is Odysseus, with fallacious arts had made impression on the people's hearts and forged treason in my patron's name, my kinsman fell. So essentially he says, look, the reason he fell out of favor is because of Odysseus. And he blames Odysseus for him being left behind. And so all of this happened. And he says, look, now I'm ruined. And now I've been left here. But he says, essentially, I want to return home safe, but I'm going to, but I'm here essentially because of Odysseus still not trusting me. And so over and over and over again, he's kind of been at me. And so finally, he actually makes me seem guilty to the Greeks. And so he goes, this is why you can trust me, because even though I was Greek, I'm a huge enemy of Odysseus. And hey, Ariel, and he did all this stuff to me. And so now, let me help you, since I don't owe them any allegiance. And
So who is this you're talking
his
about?
name is Sinon.
Okay, I wrote Sinon.
So
Okay,
Sinon, and it's by Greek tradition as well. Odysseus planned out the little Trojan horse, but he left a person. And Sinon was, it was a risky job, but he was essentially a spy. When they found the Trojan horse, he was there tied to it. And he says, look, you got to trust the Trojan horse, essentially, because they built it and they left. And he tells them all these reasons why they should trust him. Okay. And so he says mostly he says he and Odysseus had major problems, and that's why he was left behind. Okay, so that's Sinon. I'll just type him in here.
Yeah, I put a big blank for it because I had to go for it.
And then Lao Kun was the Trojan who said, no, don't open it. Don't open up or at least rip it apart or burn it or something, But he said, don't trust it. Don't bring it inside the city. But then Sinon says, no, you got to listen to me. Don't worry. You can trust me, because all these people I hate the Greeks, and that's why they left me behind, but they really are gone. And because of all their bad things that they've done, essentially Athena, this is what he tells them, this is why the Greeks supposedly left, is they had done so much evil stuff. They had they had slain a virgin with their bloody hands. They killed people in temples. They had done all sorts of things. And Pallas Athena was so angry. And so she said, look, I'm not helping you anymore. I'm not helping. And she was one of the biggest allies for the Greeks. And so she said, nope, I'm not. That's it. You're done. You have no more chance you will never win. And she says there's no way they're going to win. There's no conquest from the tedious war. And they tried to pray to her and everything like that, like, please. And essentially she says no. And so she says, because of this, because of what you've done for me, you have to build a horse and give it to Troy and then leave. And if you violate any of that, if you don't do the things I tell you, then I will just, send a scourge and a plague upon all your houses or something like that. So essentially your town in flames shall burn. So And so that's what he says. He says, you have to make the horse, leave it, and leave. Give it to the Trojans, say
So
sorry,
did
and then get
she
out.
knew that the men was in it, or she didn't know, or that
Oh
was her
no,
plan?
Sinan knew. Sinan,
There was,
Sinan
no,
was
I know
absolutely in
Sanan,
on
but
it.
what if? Yeah, I knew Sanan knew, but I'm talking about Athena. Is it
Oh
because
no,
she wanted them?
Athena probably, oh, she knows what they're doing, but
Yeah.
she's not the one. This is a total made up story. She
Okay.
never said, no, no, I'm not going to help you anymore. No, she's an absolute ally. If you read the Odyssey, she helps Odysseus all the way through. Odysseus is her absolute favorite because he's so smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but
I
this
know.
is just lies. But you know,
Yeah.
the truth is we believe what we want to believe. And the Trojans wanted to believe that they were, that they were done. And so, so essentially, Lao Kun, remember the guy I already mentioned,
Mhm.
he says, he goes, no, he just doesn't, he doesn't buy it.
Okay. They
And
should
so
have listened to him.
most people are listening, but he's not. He's like, no, no, this doesn't. He's Neptune's priest, and Neptune was an ally of the Trojans. And so he sacrifices a steer, and he was saying, no, no, we're going to get to the bottom of this. And essentially, as soon as he does that, from the sea come these serpents out
Oh
of the
yeah,
sea,
seen.
because remember,
I
they
seen
can't, they have
that
to, if they
in the
believe Lao
video I
Kun,
watched. Yeah, I seen that.
because by fate they have to take the horse inside.
Yeah.
And so the gods have no choice. And gods can't go against fate either. Juno can't go against fate. Zeus can't go, nobody can go against fate. They all have to go along with the will of fate. And fate has dictated that Troy must fall. And so he says, and what happens? These two serpents come out of the water and they attack Lao Kun and they attack his sons.
See, like when I do this, it's so mixed up because I don't know. One class I took, it might be our other class with you, or it's my history class, but they're all three kind of bobbling together with my brain. But it was more like I loved it. It was more of Helen and the follow Troy was on Helen. Yeah, it was you. You're like the woman with 1,000. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
The face that killed up. What is the saying? I'm blanked
The
out.
face that launched 1,000 ships.
Yeah, 1,000 chips. Yeah. And so I've done that one, and that was interesting. And then I tried to read
Okay, so here's Lao Kun.
I'm confusing them. I'm like, oh my God.
And this is actually, you can find this in a lot of humanities
Yeah,
books.
that was one of the
But this is
videos
Lao
that showed
Kun
that I
is
watched.
the dad, and then his sons are, even though they're supposed to be younger, they're really adults, but in small. That's how Greeks did
Okay.
it.
Yes.
But then the snakes are biting, like the one right here is biting him on the hip,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to kill him. And so as soon as the snakes go after people, then everybody goes, oh, wait a second. Okay, so who are we supposed to listen to? Not Lao
Exactly.
Kun. And so all the things Lao Kun says, everybody goes, nope, 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 nope. And we'll just do what the other people said, even though it's wrong. So the gods have to allow them to be deceived. But this also makes the Trojans look better. So the Trojans weren't stupid. The Trojans were tricked. And they were tricked by both the Greeks, who did not play fair, and by the gods, who they had to do it because of it's not because they hated the Trojans, but they had to do it because of fate. But that makes the Trojans look like the good guys. And so remember, this is a totally different take. The Greeks in the Iliad, the Greeks were the good guys and the Trojans were the bad guys. In here, though,
Yes.
it's all twisted around because, of course, this is the Trojans become the founders of Rome. So the Romans saw themselves as descendants of these great Trojans. So
So
that's
it's just
why
really from a different point of view because my head is
right.
like Judgment of Paris and then Agamemnon and Achilles and Helen and Paris. And I know that stuff pretty good. And that's kind of in my mind. And then I'm like, well, I guess this is just a totally different side of all this.
Right. Well, and you're talking about the Iliad, which is
Yeah,
really it's
with
set. It doesn't even cover the last, like the first 9 years. It's
yeah,
set in the
and I
last
got
year.
Hera and Athena and
Right. But
uh
that's when Hector is
I
killed,
like
when
all that,
Achilles is killed. Well, not
Yeah.
Achilles actually isn't killed in the Iliad, but Patroclus, his friend, is killed, and all this kind of
So
stuff is
this is
happening.
the part before or after that? I
This is
thought that Iliad
after.
was
This
first,
is
right?
this is like the final day of the Trojan War, right here,
Okay.
because that's when Troy picks up the horse. The Greeks have pretended to leave, but they take the roll the horse inside the city, and
I
that's
just
their
knew they started the war, I thought, because of Helen,
yes.
because that's what you hear. So
Well, and
the
that's
Iliad, how do
in
you say
your
it is the
other
first book?
class, Tracy.
Yes.
That's where the
I
other
read
class,
the
but
Iliad,
we
but
don't
it
deal
might
with that
be
in this one. So
pronouncing
there
it
will be
wrong.
no questions
Okay.
about the Iliad in here, not on
Okay.
the test, because we didn't cover that. So I'm not going to ask you anything that we didn't cover in class specifically. These
Okay.
3 texts are all we've got. Okay. I don't want to
Okay.
freak out poor Ariel. She's probably like, what? No, we're not
Hmm.
going to cover that. It's okay, Ariel. Okay. So Laocoon is essentially eaten. Well, he's bitten to death. He and his sons. And so, and that the general cry proclaims Laocoon is justly doomed to die. And so they see what he must have done something wrong, or he wouldn't have been eaten, bitten out by all these snakes. And then the snakes, once they're done, they actually slither over and they go to the tower of Pallas Athena and couch at her feet and lie protected.
Oh,
And so it seems to be a sign that Athena, at least, does not agree with Laocoon.
yes.
So she's saying, take the horse. Now, Athena is great with all of this because she is not on the side of the Trojans. She's on the side of the Greeks
Yes.
because she was like Juno. She was not given the golden apple. Remember, Venus got
Yes.
that. So she's the goddess of love, got it because she gave Paris Helen. And so the other 2 women are both on the side of the Greeks because they're still ticked off that they didn't get picked. Okay, so now they've pretty much finalized it. Yes, we got to bring in the horse. And so they do. And then they start having a party. It takes a while to pull it all in. So, they literally have to take levers and all sorts of stuff to haul in along the unwieldy beast. It's so big. And they actually have to break down part of the walls to get it in. Okay. So, and yet they do it. And then they start partying. And when you party pretty hard. But before they do that, Cassandra is a sister of Paris. She's the
Yes.
daughter of Priam. And
I remember
Cassandra
her. And I
is
know
well
she was
known
trying
as
to
a
win
seer.
him. Yep.
Okay, and the reason she's a seer is because Apollo fell in love with her, the god of, I don't know, music and all sorts of other stuff. Mostly he lusts after a lot of women. But Cassandra said, okay, I'll sleep with you if you give me the gift of sight. And he said, okay, boonk, there's the gift of sight. And she goes, I'm not going to sleep with you. Well, a god cannot take away a gift he's given. And so what he did is he gave her that gift. He had no choice. But then he made it so that no one would ever believe her. So she has the gift of sight, and yet no one believes her.
Yes.
And Cassandra, when Paris came to the gates of Troy with Helen, Cassandra told her dad, Priam, do not let them in because
I
you will
remember
cause a
that from the other
war
stuff.
and
Yep.
you will destroy Troy. Troy will be destroyed if you let these people in. Priam didn't listen. Nobody listens. Poor Cassandra, and said, "Oh, Cassandra," and they let him in. And Cassandra will end up being captured and taken as a slave by Agamemnon, who was the leader of the Greeks. He was the main general. And
Yep.
he took her home. She did not have a great fate because his wife hated him and already had a lover while he was gone. And so he went home to take a bath and he was murdered in the bathtub by his wife and her lover. And Cassandra was killed as well because she was his slave. And so she was murdered it's actually in a Greek play.
So will we
But
need to know that he
no,
was murdered by his wife?
no. But
Okay.
Cassandra is definitely here and she says, don't do it, don't do it. But of course,
Okay.
nobody believes. All heard and none believed the prophecy because that's what happens to poor Cassandra. And that's from the Greek tradition. But what Virgil does in this book is like everything else, he copies the Greek tradition. So the same things that happened to all of the Greek epics have to happen to Aeneas too. Okay, so they let everybody in, and eventually they have jollity because they're all like, yay, we're all done. So they party, probably drink a whole lot. And then our men were secure. They thought, oh, the Greeks are all gone. So they didn't set up guards, they didn't set up sentries, and they just all went to sleep,
Hmm.
which was so dumb. And the Greeks come back with their ships, and under the covert, under safe under covert of the night, silent night, and guided by the imperial galley's light, they come. And Sinan, who's that slave, that was left behind, the guy who said that he hated Odysseus and Odysseus hated him, he opens up the horse and lets all the people out of it.
Which of course he's lying the whole time.
Absolutely lying. He and Ulysses are tight, man.
Hmm.
So no, he lets all these people out, including Ulysses. So Odysseus is here. And they start killing people.
Yeah,
And
that's
killing people and killing people. The ones come in through the open gates, and they invade the town, which is all oppressed with sleep and wine. And those few they find awake first meet their fate. And then the people inside unbar what gates are left and say, let's go. And they do. They start slaughtering people. And remember, Hector's already gone. He died in the battles. But then essentially more and more and more people are, and he starts naming people. And these are, of course, Trojans, but they are the Trojans that are the ancestors of what the Romans think that they are. Now, much of this is goofy, because the Romans actually, the whole Roman Empire was made of so many different groups. And we don't have any historical records that anybody from Troy actually came and founded Rome. It's just a really great story. But essentially what happens is they just keep on killing people and killing people. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And now it starts to be pandemonium. And so this is essentially what's going on. So they're in an absolute riot where people are getting slaughtered left and right. Buildings are being set on fire, and Troy is falling. This is the night of Troy's fall. And now Priam's still alive. He's the king of Troy, and he had like 50 sons or something. And so, yeah, I don't know how many of them were with his wife. Oh, what was his wife's name? But I assume he had a bunch of other like slaves and stuff who had, because there's no way a woman could have 50 sons. And she had daughters too. Remember, Cassandra was a daughter.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But there's no way that anybody could win this. What's interesting though is he
Did they
says
all
that
die?
over and over again. Like no one could have beaten them. Priam could not have been, he could not have won this. No one could have won this. If the Greeks had been in our place, they couldn't have won this, because you can't make the Romans, the Trojans seem weak. That's the thing, is they had to be tricked, because otherwise they never would have lost. And
Yeah.
if they didn't deserve to win, that's one thing, but that's not, he makes it very clear they were noble and brave and all sorts of other stuff, but essentially they didn't have any hope because the
Maybe
gods
if they
had
had
tricked them.
like 20 of Achilles, they would have won.
Yes, they would. There's nothing they could do. And remember, Achilles by this point was already dead.
Yeah, that's
And
what I was
so
saying. Maybe if they had like 20 like him.
and so he was sleeping when this happened. Fear broke my slumbers, and he starts looking around town, and because he's probably in one of the higher buildings anyway, and he hears all these screams. He sees a flood of fire, and it's spreading from building to building, even going through the crops. And he just sees it going along through the plains. Everything is being destroyed. The oxen are on, everything's on fire, huts are on fire, the forest is on fire, everything's a mess. Okay, and so he's horrified. Of course, he wakes up and goes, "Whew," and the palace is has caught on fire. Okay, and so everybody's screaming, trumpets are blaring, and everything else. And he goes, he runs to meet the alarm. So he even says, resolved on death. So he's going to die fighting. But first, I got to get all my friends together. He even says, but first to gather friends. And then together we can repel the foes. So he's going to fight. He doesn't know it's hopeless yet. It looks hopeless, but he's going to die fighting if he has to, okay? And so he prays to Apollo, well, Pantheus, Apollo's priest, and then he essentially gathers weapons, he gathers friends, and then he talks to Pantheus, the priest, and he says, where can we run? Where can we make a stand? And Pantheus says, Troy is no more. And Ilium was a town. In other words, it's already over. So he
Yes.
doesn't give them any hope at all. The fire consumes the town. The foe is in charge. So the Greeks they've already vanquished us pretty much. Okay. And he even says they broke from the bowels of the fatal horse. And proud Sinon, remember that guy who was lying, throws about the flames and goes for, so he's the one setting all the fires. And then he says, he goes, there's no hope. He goes, they are going around, and if they see anybody fighting, they kill them, and anybody who doesn't find death is going to be captured and taken prisoner. And so he says, he goes, no, but he's still going to fight, okay? But he goes to defend the palace. That's the number one thing he wants to do. And I actually see, where is it? And he's actually telling people, he goes and seeks, he's crying to the crowds. He goes, brave souls, but brave, alas, in vain, come.
They're still talking about premium, correct?
Yeah, this is he and lately brought his troops. This is another person, young Corybus. Okay, who's got some troops. He's actually married Cassandra, but he's going to die. Corybus is. And Cassandra, remember, is going to be taken by Agamemnon.
Yes.
So he's an ally, and he comes to him and he goes, let's go. I mean, it looks bad, okay? In vain, we're going to fight, but come finish what our cruel fates ordain. In other words, let's die fighting. And so he still says, okay, I know there's not much of us left. So many people have already died. Other people are burning in the fire, but then let us fall, but fall amidst our foes. So let's still die fighting. And so they're all like ready to go. They're going to keep doing this. But the truth is they're going to die.
Yes.
There's no way that they're, so the thing is, this is the problem. And this is what's so interesting about this passage is that, remember, Aeneas lives. He doesn't die fighting. And so how in the world do you do that? How do you escape if you were going to die fighting? And so he has to justify running away. And this is what's so important. Okay. So he goes out and they're trying to fight. They're trying to find where they need to be, but death is everywhere. And he goes, why is there a delay? And while the spoils are borne away, our ships are laden with the Trojan store, and you, like truants, come too late. And then essentially what they find is that as they're going through, some people are already dead that they were looking for. And in fact, they decide they're going to go and look for, because there's Corybus again, Cassandra's husband. And they think, well, we're going to go and do what we can. Let's go and take what we can from their ships. And they've already taken some of Trojan stuff, so why don't we go and get their stuff? And so it's then change we shields and their devices bear and so let's pretend that let's take the Greeks' arms. If they took our stuff, we'll take their stuff. And so they start putting on a bunch of anybody they find armor on, they take the armor off the dead people and they start putting it on. But they really think they're going to get at least get the Greeks really good. They still think this. But what use of valor can be made when heaven's propitious powers refuse their aid? So in other words, no matter how much we want to, we cannot win. And we're not going to get what we want. Even Cassandra, and he shows this, the royal prophetess, which is so funny because nobody believed her, remember? The fair Cassandra is dragged by her disheveled hair. And she was a follower of Minerva, or Pallas Athena, but it couldn't protect her. So she's taken captive and her tender arms were tied, so it makes it, of course, pitiful. So sad a sight Coroebus could not bear, because remember, that's her husband. But fired with rage, distracted with despair, amid the barbarous ravagers he flew. Now, what happened to these women when they were taken? Yes, they were absolutely raped. Women were not treated well by on either side. You were taken as a slave, and then you were used as a slave, and you had no rights, and they could do anything they wanted. Okay, and they all follow Coroebus. He's angry because she's been taken captive, and they all go along with him. But then we from our friends received this fatal blow. So it's essentially our leaders' rash example. They're all going and following this. From the temple, stones start pouring down. Because they're wearing Greek armor, all of the Trojans think that they're Greeks. And so they start raining them with rocks. So that whole plan they had, oh, we're going to pretend to be Greeks and we're going to get stuff done because we're going to slip by the foe's defenses. Well, they don't slip by the Trojans' defenses, and that's the problem. And so we realize, okay, great, this is not working. And so the brother kings with Ajax, that means Menelaus, Agamemnon, and Ajax, who are some of the biggest. Menelaus and Agamemnon were brothers. I'll just type them in here. Menelaus and Agamemnon. And Menelaus was married to Helen. He's the one who gets his wife back at the end of all of this. And they live happily ever after, which is really weird. But anyway, this is just battle. You have to remember every little thing that happens? No. But Coroebus then it says, oppressed with odds, we fall. In other words, they're not going to last. So Coroebus is stabbed first at the altar of Athena. And then Ripheus is stabbed. And then Dymas, so he starts naming all of these, just like we did. This is actually how the Iliad went, where they'd name all these people who were killed over and over and over again. And it was always described sometimes in really grotesque detail. This is a bit tamer, but the Romans actually were okay with that. But essentially all these people are dying. And he says, I live not by my fault. This is Aeneas again talking. I didn't try to survive. So I'm not a weenie, is what he's saying. I'm not, I wasn't scared to die. But when I could not fight and would have died, borne off to distance by the growing tide, old Iphitus and I were hurried thence, with Peleus wounded and without defense. So they're actually pushed with the tide of men, and they end up they essentially hear noise from the palace, and they go, we got to go to defend the king. So we run to die or disengage the king. So they're like, oh no, Priam's being attacked. So they get pushed out of the way while all sorts of people die. And they run up into the palace to save Priam. But can they save Priam? Still people are trying to throw stones at anybody trying to go into the palace. But they actually got into the palace. And so they make it in, but they're trying to find Hecuba. That's her name. Priam's wife is named Hecuba. I knew it would come to me. And so they essentially were trying to find a way. They were following the path they knew because they were Trojan to the king's closet where they must be hiding or something. Now Astyanax is the son of Hector, and he was a baby when Hector died. He was just and he in fact, when Hector was wearing his armor, he comes to say goodbye to his wife and Astyanax cries because he can't he doesn't recognize his dad in the armor. It's too scary. But it's also in sort of a, hey, by the way, Hector, you're going to die type of foreshadowing. But anyway, they're looking to essentially protect the royal family, right? And so they go into the private rooms where they think that they're going to be hiding, and they're going to defend the king at least and keep him from being taken. But unfortunately, the walls are being destroyed slowly, and then the roof goes down at once, and then it ends up injuring a bunch of the Greeks too. And so, but then they keep sending more and more Greeks in, and they're going to take the palace. It's like, well, we're going to fight them off as long as we possibly can. Again, it's the against all odds kind of thing. Okay. So but again, he's not talking about leaving, is he? At all. He's going to fight to the death. But it kind of ignores the fact that he's survived. Okay. And so finally they get in. Okay, the mighty breach is made, the rooms concealed appear, and all the palace is revealed. And that puts them in harm's way too, though, because the palace isn't protected anymore. And so armed soldiers, now the maids that are in there with the queen see all these soldiers, and there isn't anything to protect them anymore. Okay, the women start shrieking. Everybody's in trouble. They're all scared. And everything gets broken through. So the Greeks are all coming in. And if they find anybody trying to defend the king and queen and all of the, her handmaidens and stuff like that, they kill them. And Astyanax, Hector's son, will be killed. Children will be killed or taken prisoner. But yeah, and they finally, he sees this is Aeneas. So everything's, they're going in and they're sweeping people. They're going through and killing people. And then Aeneas said, I saw the unhappy queen, the 100 wives. So I guess Priam had 100 wives, and where old Priam stood to stain his hallowed altar with his brood. The 50 nuptial beds, such hopes had he, so large a promise of a progeny. Because remember, he had tons of kids, 50 sons. And all this stuff. So, but it's all going to go to the victor, and that's all to the Greeks. And they take over. And he says, perhaps you may of Priam's fate inquire. And of course, he sees his whole town, all of Troy, burning. And he's old. So he can't do things because he can't defend himself because he has feeble shoulders, scarce the weight sustain. He can't be armed, and he's already injured, and he despairs of success, and he is going to be, he knows he's going to die. And so of course they're going to try to help, but then there's Hecuba, that's the wife, and she tries to find some place to hide, but for shelter she sought in vain, and the Greeks drive them on. And the queen, when she beheld her trembling lord and hanging by his side a heavy sword, she essentially laments all of that. Were Hector here, even Hector would not be able to fight all these people off. So Hector was the greatest warrior on the Trojan side, but there's no way he could win against all of this. And with a last salute, she embraces the poor old man. And then they start killing. The youth of Priam, several of the different princes die. And Priam sees that the death of the youth, and he's upset. And he's, of course, he can't do anything. There's nothing he can do to stop this. Okay. And so, it's bad. It's all, this is really the chapter that's as much like the Iliad as it could possibly be. It's where all of the blood is there, and all these people are dying, and women being carried off, by their hair and stuff like that. And then he sees Helen, and she's actually in Vesta's temple. That was the Vestal virgins, even though Helen is not a virgin. And she doesn't know. She's of course traumatized, but remember, they did all this for her. And she says, for Ilium burnt, she dreads the Trojan sword more. And so she dreads because of what happens to Troy, she's afraid of the Trojans because they might kill her. But she also even more dreads the vengeance of her lord, and that's Menelaus. Remember the guy who married her, and then she was taken away. And she knows she's also that a lot of the gods hate her, and some of the gods who, who refuged her, will hate her because of what she did to Troy. Because she sees herself as, at fault. Many other people do too, but I can't say I really do. Um, and he actually doesn't like her because, what she gets to triumphant sail before the wind and leave the flames unhappy Troy behind. So she essentially says, he says that it's all her fault, and now she's going to get to go home and be happy, and all of Troy will fall because of her. And so and honestly, I think Helen was, I don't know what you guys think, but I think Helen was given a bad, we don't have any evidence actually that she wanted to leave her husband. But once she was taken to Troy, she accepted where she was. Like she and Paris obviously were together. But I mean, there's no way to know what she really wanted. She didn't have much. Women in general didn't have much of a choice. Okay, so essentially, he's upset about that. But let's see, where are we now? Let's see. Okay, so he was upset. All these people are going to end up dying with no recourse and no vengeance. And then he sees a light spread over the place, and a shining heavenly bright, and it's his mom. And yet she's never been so radiant. Okay, she looks amazing. And she held my hand, the destined blow to break, and says, "My son, why are you neglecting my commands and those whom I protect?" And this is Venus. She comes to him and she says, "Why are you not doing what I said? Why are you so angry? Look if your helpless father yet survive, or if Asianus or Crusha live. Go look to your house, okay? And go protect them. That's your job. Who cares about Helen?" Remember, of course, Venus was the one who got Helen and Paris put together. But forget about them. You're supposed to take care of yourself, okay? So stop doing that and go and do what I told you to do. And so he does. He actually obeys his mother's will. Because remember, she's a goddess. She's the one who gets to tell him what to do. So he didn't like redirect where he was going so that he wouldn't die. He did it because Venus told him to. A goddess ordered him to go. And so that's exactly what he follows her commands. He actually wants to go find his dad and his wife. And so that's what she says. She even says, she goes, "Haste hence, my son, this fruitless labor end, because you can't win. So haste where your trembling spouse, so your wife, and sire, your dad, attend. Haste and a mother's care your passage shall befriend." In other words, I'll help you if you go and do what I say. And then she vanishes. And so everything's still falling apart. Everything's in flames and stuff like that. But he has to go. He's been ordered to go find his dad and his wife. Okay. And so, let's see. Where am I? I'm trying to figure out who's here. Yeah, they're just, okay. So let's go. I'm trying to find exactly where we get to his wife.
I had to go away for a minute. The sun you're talking about with Venus, is that Cupid or Armor or who?
No, this is actually arrived at home. Okay, so this is actually Because I know there's a point where he's actually going to look for his wife, and he ends up being told she comes to him as a ghost. Yeah, so where is it? Okay, then he's essentially he's going to die, but he says myself, my wife, my son, my family, we're trying to get everywhere and get out. That's what Venus wants. Why does he have to leave? Why does Venus not want him to die fighting? What's his destiny? He has to found Troy. I mean, has to found Rome. So if he dies, Rome's never going to get founded. And so he knows this is all going to end bad. So he has to go find his dad. Can I, without so dear a father, live? So he has to go find dad. And yet that's um that's not going to be so good. The wretch who slew the son, inhuman in the father view. Okay, so he's talking about all the Pyrrhus. Remember, Pyrrhus was the guy who went in and slew Priam's son in front of him. And um essentially he's saying, look, everything's falling apart. He goes, how can I leave? And remember, his mom came in and said, get out of here, do what I say, and then disappeared. And he's trying to follow her orders, but he's whining. He's saying, look, I can't leave all these people. Can I just take my people and leave all these people to die? But he has no choice. If you go against fate, what happens? You still end up doing exactly what fate said. If you really try to go against fate, worse things can happen. Okay. And so um, essentially he was going to go, and he was just like, I don't know, I still think I need to go fight. But Portia stopped my way and crossed the threshold in my passage lay, embraced my knees, and when I would have gone, she showed me my feeble sire and tender son. And she says, if death be your design, at least take us along to share your destiny. So if you're going to go out to die, then you might as well take us with you, because we'll all end up dying too. So don't do this. And then, so she goes, you can't just abandon us all, your dad, your son, and me. And essentially what he realizes, he can't do it. He can't just go out and die and not listen to his family. Okay. And so he knows he has to do something. And that's when he decides, okay, we've got to go. They essentially go to get in a ship. And he says that his father says, now, said he, my son, no more delay. Let's go. If heaven is telling us which way to go, we have to follow that. And essentially we have to save the Trojan race by escaping. Does that make sense? So we have to live on so the Trojans don't die completely. And so, and he even says, he goes, haste, my dear father, there's no time to wait, and load my shoulders with all of, so they start carrying all sorts of stuff. And he's going to, but then it's, where is it? He says that he's going to go back and get his wife. Yeah. Croatia kept behind by choice. And so they're going, and she kind of follows behind. And now he's worried, because he's worried not for himself, because again, he's Mr. Brave, but he's worried for his baby and his dad and his wife. They finally get to the ruined gate, and he goes, the people are coming, we need to get going, and we got to get on. He says, then he realizes, after he and his dad and the son are all at the gate and ready to go and climb onto a ship and get away, he realizes that he lost Croatia. He goes, he doesn't know if she, was it her fatal destiny? Did she die? Was she too weary? Did she get lost? And essentially he's like, I got to go back and get her. And so, he really thinks he's going to do that, but then her ghost, let's see, where is it? Mhm. So he's still going, and then he meets up. I know where she is. Okay. He's actually going back through the streets, passing all sorts of Greeks who were killing people, and he's yelling out her name. And at length she hears, and suddenly through the shades of night appears, but she is a ghost. So he realizes he's lost her. He goes back to get her, and she catches up to him and essentially appears, and she's a ghost, and she says, "Don't stay. I'm dead. Desist. Don't be calling out my name. Go. I'm dead already. You can't save me. You can't find me. You can't take me with you. You've lost me already because somebody killed me. Go." And so over and over again, of course, he tries to stay and fight, is willing to die fighting for all of this stuff. And over again, everybody tells him to go. And so he does. Now he knows his wife is gone, so he goes back to the ship, gets on there with his dad and his little boy, and flees. Unwillingly, because again, he's brave, but he flees. Does that make sense? So that you can survive, but you have to do it bravely. Like, there was no hope. He's not going to save Troy. But if he dies, he can't fulfill his destiny. And so the goddess, his mom, tells him, everybody's like, "We can't win this. We need to get to safety." People are over and over urging him not to fight and to get on the boat and go. But it takes several people and many different tries to get him out of the mess where he's going to get slaughtered and onto a boat where he can get away. So he's still brave. But in the meantime, he's lost his wife, which is also key. And we'll end this soon. But what's key is he doesn't have a wife. Like, if his wife had survived, if she was on the ship, this would be a very different story. But he's a widower, and he just met Dido, who has been hit with Cupid's arrow, so she's utterly in love with him, and he can actually reciprocate that, at least for a while. What's going to happen, though, and we don't read this part, Dido of course, adores him because of the way she was tricked into doing that. But she doesn't want him to leave. She says, "Why don't you just stay here, marry me?" And she's been sworn off men for a while because of what happened to her husband before, because he was killed by his brother. It was horrible. And then hid it for years. It was finally found out. But she wants to be married to Aeneas, but Aeneas can't be king of Carthage. He has to go on and fulfill his fate, his destiny. And so when he leaves, she actually builds a pyre up on top of the palace so he can see it. And she puts essentially an effigy of her, like a fake version of her husband, on the bed, on the wooden pyre to set fire to it. And then she jumps onto the pyre and stabs herself with Aeneas's sword and dies. And so Aeneas, who's off at sea, he can't stop her from dying. Even if he came back, he couldn't save her life. And he still has to go to Rome. And so he's left bereft. And he's lost his one wife, then he lost Dido because she committed suicide. She was so upset that he had abandoned her. And why was she so upset? Because Venus made sure that she was given that kind of that super obsessive, undying love for Aeneas. So again, the gods mess with people, and bad things happen. But does that all make sense now?
I have a few questions. Do you want me just to ask them to you at the end, like when we're
You
not
can
on
ask
here?
me now, because I'll
I
answer
asked you all
until
ago,
you
but
run out of questions.
I think it cut out because I had to leave for a minute. We're talking about Aeneas, right? This the whole
Yes,
thing's been about
this is
Aeneas.
all the Aeneid.
I was trying to look it up.
I'm not hearing you, Tracy. Your mic says it's on, but I'm not hearing it if you're asking questions.
Well, on the Wi-Fi.
Okay, here's something.
It completely blanked me out.
Oh,
I think I didn't even hear. I guess I'll have to go back and listen. I was trying to look it up where I didn't have to ask you, but Venus is his mom, you said, right?
Yes. Yes.
And on this thing, it says parents is Aphrodite and wife, Creation,
Okay.
and Lavina.
Aphrodite is the Greek name for Venus.
Okay, good deal. That makes
So it's
more
like they
sense.
keep saying Pallas for Athena, but
Okay.
it's Pallas, Athena, and Minerva are the same person.
Okay. Gotcha. All right.
They do that all the way through this because the Romans adopted all the Greek gods. They just renamed them all, but they would
Yeah, I
use those
remember that
names
where we had to match
interchangeably.
them up, but that's,
And so
yeah.
even Zeus, that's the Greek version, he only had one name in the Greek, but he has Jove, um, Jupiter, which we know better because of that. But Jove is most of the Roman literature says Jove, but he has other names as well. And they also will intersperse like the Greek names in there because they all knew Greek myth.
Okay.
So it's just like Ulysses is Odysseus, but
Yeah.
they'll use both here.
I need to
Greeks
go find
only
that
use the
chart and
Greek.
write it down. They should have
So
just kept one name.
anything else? Other questions?
Well, I wrote down, I had on the other side, um, I put Aenus live, so that's his name. How many of that? I thought we were talking about Coracus, but I waited so long to ask you. It's hard for me to. I'll just go back and listen. I've wrote these notes so
Well, and
fast.
Croesus, his wife, she's the one who dies. And then we had Cassandra,
Yeah, I got Cassandra right
and
there.
Cassandra's husband, I just want to get the spelling. I had it earlier, but he died pretty early though. Went through all this. He
Yeah,
was
so
one of
I
the
got
first to
Paula
fall in that
Manita,
group.
and about her arms were tied. I've got that wrote down.
Yes, and she was
My
pulled by
notes
her
were
hair, which
good.
is just awful. I mean, she's probably a
Yeah, that
bloody
is
mess, poor
horrible.
thing.
So
Why
out
couldn't
of
it be
this,
nicer?
what will like be on the test? I don't know like the key points. I mean, I know you're supposed
What
to
you're
know
going to want
all
to
of
know
it,
is
but
who is Dido, who is Aeneas, you know, who's like the fact that Venus is his mom is important. What's he supposed to do in this? He's supposed to go found Rome. Everybody from the very beginning of the epic all the way through, they just keep reminding us, but he has to go found Rome. And so even with Dido, she's a nice lady and
yeah,
she's good to him and they would have been a good couple, but he has to go found Rome. That's the whole point of the entire thing. He goes into the underworld, like, but we don't read that part, so I'm not going to test you on that. But most of what they do, what Aeneas does on his adventures, are exactly what Odysseus and um, the other Greek warriors and everything in the other two epics, what they did. So Odysseus goes to the underworld. Well, so does Aeneas. Odysseus, has to um, he has destinies, and so does Aeneas. Odysseus has to think his way through things, so does Aeneas. Even they both meet the Minotaur. So a lot of this is kind of copying the Greek epics, but making a Roman version so the Romans can be heroic instead.
okay.
So that's really the big. It's not. Am I going to ask you all the different names? Priam, Anasti, and Ax? No. Hecuba? No. But I could ask a question. Why does he flee from onto a ship instead of staying and fighting? Well, because it's hopeless. Because his mom tells him don't. Because his wife tells him don't. All these people are telling him get out, and he wants to protect his family, and he chooses that over a hopeless cause. Does
Does
that make sense?
anybody, yes, does anybody live through this?
You mean
I
the
think,
Trojan War?
yeah, Helen lives, right?
Helen lives, and actually in the Odyssey, she's married to Menelaus still, and they're living happily ever after on Crete,
Hmm.
literally. And it's weird. Yeah, actually, Odysseus's son Telemachus, he meets them, and he's like, "How's it going?" "Oh, great, everything's fine." They seem like a happy couple. Very weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
But of course, at that point, Telemachus still hasn't seen his father again. His father's been away 20 years because Odysseus hasn't been able to get home. So it's interesting. And it's a lot of stuff. But these are characters that mattered historically to so many of these populations. And the Romans just kind of picked it up and they said, hey, you know, they made Troy their origin, even though really no Trojans ended up on the Italian peninsula. That's just fake. But as far as we know, though, you know, until Aeneas and a few things, the Greeks didn't act like anybody survived. Well, if they did, they survived only as slaves, like they were taken captive. And then, like Cassandra, she still didn't survive. She was killed when she got back to when Agamemnon took her home. So it was, I mean, the Greeks mostly survived. You know, the ones who survived the war mostly went home happy and they were done. But yeah, the Trojans, this is even all the people that he names, you know, that see all these people survived, even though Troy was sacked. That's, of course, trying to give credence to the idea that Aeneas and his buddies founded Rome, because they'd have to have an army to do that. And in fact, towards the end of this epic, he has to face the armies that are in power around in that area and defeat them, so that he can be, I don't know, he's not really the first Roman emperor, but he's the one who establishes where Rome is. And then his descendant, Romulus, will actually name it Rome after himself.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
And he has a twin. I think he has a twin brother, and then that twin
Romulus
brother
and
kills
Remus.
one.
Mhm.
Yeah, he kills him. Yeah.
Yeah, he kills him, and then they're born of they're sons of Ares, the god of war.
Yep. Yep.
Well,
I
Mars.
like that
Sorry,
story. So it's stuff
the
like
Roman
I
god of war
remember.
is Mars. So
Yes.
yeah, so they one of them kills the other one, and then Romulus names Rome after himself.
Mm-hmm.
So, other questions?
Now I need to ask you something like whenever, can I do it where we're like after the chat, ask you something that's kind of more private?
Yeah, totally. Let me go ahead and stop the recorder though.
Okay.